The elevator doors slid open with a metallic sigh, and for a brief second the polished marble floors and golden chandeliers seemed to shimmer with disdain. She stepped out. No diamonds, no silk, no army of stylists fixing imaginary flaws. Just a plain, crumpled dress and a pair of leather shoes so worn they whispered of every mile she'd walked alone. Conversations halted. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. One by one, the roomful of dazzling faces turned to her, confusion curdling into ridicule. A laugh escaped somewhere near the velvet couches. Another followed sharper this time, slicing through the air. "Seriously, who let the cleaning staff onto the top floor?" Someone sneered loud enough to draw grins from the nearest cluster of actresses wrapped in glitter and ego. But she didn't flinch. She just stood there, a tiny island of silence against an ocean of judgment. And somewhere in that breathless moment, destiny shifted, though no one in that room of golden gods realized it yet. Today, the girl they dismissed would teach them all what true nobility looked like. The moment stretched longer than it should have taught, and humming with a mean sort of curiosity. Heads turned in slow succession, first with idle boredom, then with open disdain as they registered what had entered their sanctum. A girl in a dress, the color of wet sand. Hair uncombed, shoes battered like they had fought every sidewalk crack in Manhattan. Someone near the window let out a sharp, disbelieving snort. "She looks like she wandered in from a soup kitchen," a voice stage whispered, sweet and venomous. Ripples of laughter followed, polite at first, then bolder as no one stepped in to defend the interloper. Ellie Harper knew exactly what she looked like. She felt the way the air shifted heavy with mockery, as if the luxury itself was offended by her presence. But she didn't fidget, she didn't lower her eyes or tug at the hem of her wrinkled dress. Instead, she walked steadily, deliberately into the very heart of the room where the cruelty sharpened its claws. Clusters of actresses draped across velvet chairs and leather couches eyed her with a cocktail of pity and superiority. Jewels glittered at their throats and wrists. Dresses flowed like rivers of gold and crimson. The scent of designer perfumes hung thick in the air. Every woman a curated masterpiece polished to perfection for this audition of a lifetime. Across the room, Brooke Kendall, crown princess of the casting, leaned in to whisper to her entourage, "She's not even trying. Is this some kind of joke?" Her polished fingernails traced the rim of a champagne flute with lazy malice. Brooke didn't need to raise her voice. The ridicule carried on its own. Others joined in like hyenas, scenting a wounded gazelle, snickering. Trading glances, tossing barbs with the effortless cruelty of the beautiful and the safe. A young producer tie loosened, chuckled into his phone. "She's with Claire Dawson. Damn how the mighty have fallen." Someone else chimed in. Claire must be desperate. Even buskers in Central Park look more put together. Ellie caught fragments of it all. The laughter, the pity, the disbelief, but let it roll off her skin like rainwater off stone. She moved to a corner by the floor-to-ceiling windows and sat down quietly, folding her hands in her lap. Outside Manhattan glittered under the noon sun, steel glass and dreams stacked into the sky. She closed her eyes, breathing slow. Anchoring herself not to the jeering room, but to the calm beating inside her chest. Claire had warned her. Don't answer, don't flinch, don't give them anything. And so she didn't. She let them look, let them laugh. Because soon, when everything turned upside down, they would remember this moment and they would choke on it. Meanwhile, Brooke, unable to resist one final jab, sauntered closer with an exaggerated sway of her hips. She stopped just short of Ellie's chair, tilting her head with mock concern. "You lost, sweetheart. The auditions for charity cases are downstairs." Another round of cruel laughter bloomed around them, feeding off the venom like wildfire. Ellie opened her eyes slowly, meeting Brooke's gaze with a look so calm, so unshaken, it was like a slap in itself. Not anger, not humiliation, just a patient, knowing silence that rattled more than any shouted defense ever could. Brooke blinked, momentarily thrown off by the absence of fear. For a flicker of a second, the room faltered, the easy mockery stuttering like a scratched record. Ellie didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. You're not my judge. You're not even my competition. Outside, the wind rattled faintly against the glass, whispering promises of a storm no one inside could see coming yet. The wolves circled, glittering and gorgeous, every smile honed to a blade. This wasn't just a casting call, it was a battlefield dressed in satin and silk. 30 women had been summoned to the top of the noble corporation's shimmering glass tower, but only one would be crowned. The reward. A global campaign for the most prestigious fragrance house in the world, directed by none other than Ethan Cole, the man whose touch turned art films into legends. One face, one story immortalized for a decade. No one here had come to lose, and they didn't intend to go down quietly. Across the room, alliances were being forged and broken with a glance. Old grudges flickered behind polished smiles. Debts from past award seasons whispered just beneath the surface. If you listened closely enough, you could almost hear the knives being sharpened. Brooke Kendall reigned supreme among them, her position undisputed. She had it all, the senator father, the fashion mogul. Mother. A childhood spent gliding through ballroom etiquette classes and charity galas. Her pedigree wasn't earned, it was baked into her bones. She moved through the room like royalty at a coronation, her champagne dress catching every shard of light. When she laughed, others laughed with her. When she frowned, the air chilled. Brooke's inner circle, a hand-picked selection of rising starlets and socialite actresses, trailed after her like a court. Together, they orchestrated the flow of conversation, deciding who was in, who was invisible, who was already dead on arrival. Ellie Harper, with her second-hand shoes and a dress that had seen better decades, wasn't even considered an afterthought. She was an insult to the architecture, an eyesore among living sculptures. Brooke leaned against the marble buffet table, studying the competition through narrowed eyes. Mia Carson, the self-made Golden Globe winner, hovered near the window, checking her phone too often. Nervous, weak, easy prey. Across from her, 2 heiresses from film dynasties whispered furiously, their perfectly glossed lips betraying the panic they tried so hard to hide. Newcomers and veterans alike were feeling it. The heat, the hunger, the pressure to be perfect. Brooke smirked to herself. Let them crack. She had been groomed for this moment since before she could walk, when she played the harp, when she quoted ancient poetry, when she moved like history itself. It wouldn't be an act, it would be muscle memory. And when Ethan Cole looked for nobility, he wouldn't have to imagine it. He would find it standing right in front of him, draped in emeralds and pearls. Her gaze slid back to Ellie, who still sat motionless in the corner. Brooke's lip curled. She won't last 5 seconds. She murmured to her assistant, who tittered obediently. What a waste of a slot, someone else agreed. Claire Dawson, sitting near Ellie, caught the words but didn't flinch. Her expression was unreadable, a poker face honed over years of managing stars. But inside her stomach twisted, she had gambled everything on this moment. Claire's last claim to fame, Vanessa Lane, had abandoned her career at its peak for love and obscurity, leaving Claire's agency battered and bleeding. Brooke and her cronies loved to remind everyone of that downfall. To them, Claire backing a nobody like Ellie was just proof of her irrelevance. Brooke moved closer to Claire, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble. She bent down with a syrupy smile that didn't touch her eyes. Claire darling, she purred, if you're looking for new work after today, my family's opening a vineyard. I'm sure they could use an extra pair of hands during harvest season. Her friends chuckled behind manicured hands, pretending to find the joke harmless. Claire smiled tightly. Appreciate the offer, she said coolly, but I think I'll be busy managing a star. The air tensed, the insult hanging between them like a drawn blade. Brooke's smile thinned, but she turned away, unwilling to let anyone see her rattled. The assistant stage manager called for attention. "Ladies, we're beginning the auditions. Please have your numbers ready." A murmur rippled through the room. Champagne glasses clinked down onto tables. Conversations snapped shut like trapdoors. The game was officially on. Each woman tightened her posture, retouched her lipstick, adjusted her designer gowns. It was time to fight, not with fists or words, but with grace. Presence. The impossible art of appearing effortless. Ellie Harper stood slowly smoothing the wrinkles in her dress with steady hands. No stylist approached. No entourage hovered. She had nothing to hide behind, no reputation to shield her, no legacy to whisper on her behalf. Only herself. Claire watched her heart hammering painfully. She had seen something in Ellie few others could not polish, not pedigree, but something wilder, something rarer. A soul unbought, a spirit that refused to kneel. It was a dangerous gamble, one that could break them both. But sometimes, Claire thought as she watched Brooke's coterie preen and posture for invisible cameras, it's the uninvited storm that clears the rot from a kingdom. And if today had any justice left in it, that storm had just stood up and was walking toward destiny. The first name was called, slicing the tension like a blade. "Mia Carson, you're up." Mia rose from her seat, smoothing the satin of her navy dress with trembling hands. Around her polite smiles, masked sharp eyes. Each woman secretly grateful she wasn't going first. Mia had earned her fame the hard way. No famous family, no inherited fortune, just raw talent and relentless grit. She crossed the gleaming marble floor like a soldier marching to war, her heels clicking a little too loudly. The casting room door swung open, swallowing her whole. For a moment, silence. Then faintly the low rumble of Ethan Cole's voice, sharp, unimpressed. The room tensed, ears straining. Less than a minute later, Mia reappeared. Her face drained of color. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The devastation in her hollow eyes said it all. Her manager rushed forward, whispering frantic reassurances, but Mia only shook her head, dazed. She clutched her sides as if holding herself together, blinking against the sudden brightness of the lounge. Then, unable to bear the weight of so many judgmental eyes, she fled, heels clattering down the hallway like the retreat of a defeated army. A ripple of uneasy laughter rolled through the room. One loss wasn't unexpected. Mia was talented. Sure, but she lacked the polish, the pedigree. It made sense. They reassured themselves. She wasn't really competition anyway. "Next," the assistant called, voice crisp. A tall brunette floated in her gown, a cascade of crystals. She lasted 3 minutes. Another went in a legacy actress whose parents had 3 Oscars between them. She emerged, blinking back tears, her mascara smudging at the corners of her eyes. The casualties mounted. Each new failure tightened the atmosphere, drawing the walls inward. Suffocating. The actresses who had once lounged like queens now sat stiff and silent, knuckles whitening around champagne flutes. The director's voice, audible even through thick doors, showed no mercy. She acts with her teeth, not her soul. She glides like a puppet, strings and all. She looks noble, but inside she's hollow. Empty. Every word was a bullet, and outside the women waited, wondering who would fall next. Brooke Kendall crossed her legs slowly, the picture of studied indifference. She sipped her mineral water without a tremor. Let them fall. She had nothing to fear. Brooke had prepared her entire life for rooms like this. She wore her upbringing like armor. Generations of private tutors, summers abroad learning the lost arts of etiquette and diplomacy, harp lessons before she could spell the word music. She wasn't pretending to be noble, she was noble. At least that's what she believed. When the assistant called number 14 Brooke Kendall, she rose smoothly, her every step choreographed in invisible music. A hush fell. Even the doubters straightened in their seats, instinctively recognizing a predator among prey. Brooke walked into the casting room, head-high gown trailing like mist behind her. The heavy door clicked shut, and for a rare moment the wolves outside felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she'll make it. Maybe the bloodbath would end with her. Inside, Ethan Cole looked up from his notes, his scowl softening fractionally. Finally, someone who looked the part. He gestured curtly. "Come closer." Brooke approached with easy grace, her posture regale without effort. Ethan studied her in silence, eyes flickering over the exquisite tailoring, the jade hairpin anchoring her sleek blonde bun, the flawless poise. "Choose your instrument," he said, sweeping an arm toward the array of props, grand piano chess set, calligraphy brush, silk fan, and harp. Brooke's gaze flickered to the harp, a subtle smile touching her lips. Perfect. The harp was treacherous, complicated, an elegant death trap for amateurs, but for her it was a homecoming. She crossed the room, the hem of her gown whispering secrets across the floor. She settled by the harp, delicate fingers brushing the strings with intimate familiarity. When she played, the room filled with soundlight, pure, confident, not just a melody, but a memory of grandeur. Ethan's eyes narrowed, watching every movement. When she finished, he didn't dismiss her outright. Instead, he murmured something to his assistant, too low to hear. Brooke's heart leapt. Good, very good. The assistant approached her with a respectful nod. "Miss Kendall, thank you. Could you wait outside? We'll let you know." Brooke inclined her head gracefully, masking the surge of triumph within her chest. She knew what that meant. She was on the shortlist. The others would have to watch her sail past them once again, just as she always had. Brooke turned and swept out of the room, every inch the anointed queen. The door closed behind her with a satisfying click. Outside, faces turned toward her like sunflowers seeking light. No one said it aloud, but the message was clear. She had won. Brooke returned to her seat, legs crossed at the ankle, back straight, a serene smile playing on her lips. She barely heard the assistant call the next number, tick 15. It didn't matter. The rest were just formalities now. Noise before the coronation. Brooke accepted a glass of juice from her assistant with the casual elegance of someone awaiting a crown victory, tasted sweet. Inevitable. Across the room, Ellie Harper opened her eyes. The assistant's voice echoed across the lounge like a verdict. "Number 15, Ellie Harper." For a moment, no one moved. Then Ellie stood slow and unhurried, brushing invisible dust from her worn dress. Heads swiveled to track her progress like vultures eyeing fresh carrion. Brooke arched an eyebrow, sipping her juice with deliberate casualness. "This should be fun," she murmured. Claire didn't speak. She only watched as Ellie walked toward the heavy doors, straight-backed, unflinching as if the jeers and stares were nothing more than passing weather. The door closed behind her with a muffled click. Inside the casting room was a cathedral of light and silence. Sunlight poured through the massive windows, catching on the polished grand piano, the gleaming chess set, the delicate harp. At the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, arms crossed, mouth already twisted into a frown. The moment he saw Ellie, his face hardened. "You mocking me?" he barked, voice slicing through the stillness. "Is this some kind of joke?" Ellie said nothing. She let the words wash over her, impassive. Ethan took a step closer, incredulous. "You're dressed like a beggar, and you dare step into my room, out now." The assistant half rose from his chair, uncertain whether to intervene. Ellie moved not toward the door, but toward the harp. Her fingers, bare and steady, brushed the golden frame, trailing lightly over the strings. "Don't touch that!" Ethan snapped, stepping forward, but then the first note rang out. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was haunting. A single pluck of a string vibrating in the sunlight, as pure as a mountain spring. Ethan froze mid-step. Ellie sat gracefully at the harp, her body folding into it like a lover's embrace. And then she played. Not the pretty, easy melodies of rich girls showing off in music rooms. No. She pulled from the strings a song older than the city outside, older than the arrogance in the room, Shenandoah. The notes wept and soared, trembling with an ache so deep it made Ethan's breath catch. They spoke of rivers and wide-open plains, of longing and loss, and the stubborn dignity of those who refuse to break. The music filled the room, climbing the windows, curling into the high corners like smoke. Every thread of disdain Ethan had knotted inside himself began to unravel. He saw the dress again. Not as shabby, but as a deliberate choice. He saw the bare face, not lazy but fearless. He saw Ellie not as an intruder, but as a revelation. When the last trembling note faded into the sunlit air, silence reigned. Real silence. Not the mocking quiet that had greeted her entrance. This was the silence that followed a blow to the heart. Ethan cleared his throat voice, rasping like it had been struck. "What is nobility to you?" he asked, more a whisper than a demand now. Ellie looked at him, steady and unflinching. Her voice, when it came, was low but resonant, vibrating with something far older than mere confidence. "Nobility," she said, "isn't silk or diamonds or names carved into the walls of ancient halls. It's not the way you hold a wine glass or quote dead poets at the right parties. True nobility," she continued, her eyes locking onto his, "is the strength to stand alone when the world mocks you. It's the grace to hold your head high in rags, just as you would in a crown. It's dignity that no title, no fortune, no tailor can weave into your skin." The words hung there heavy and bright. Ethan stared at her, his chest tightening in a way he hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was the spirit he had been chasing through. Countless castings through glitter and pretense and empty smiles. He found himself smiling a rare, genuine curve of the lips that startled even his assistant. "You," he said softly, "you understand." Ellie inclined her head slightly, neither triumphant nor humble, simply true. Outside the casting room, the actresses shifted impatiently. Snippets of conversation buzzed. "I thought she'd be out in seconds. What's taking so long? Maybe Ethan's chewing her out so hard he's lost track of time." Brooke twirled a loose strand of hair around her finger, forcing a laugh. "Relax. It's charity work. He's just letting her down easy." But beneath her polished exterior, an unfamiliar tremor was building. The harp had carried through the door, faint, yes, but unmistakable. And Brooke knew music. She knew Shenandoah. She also knew how impossibly hard it was to play it like that. You didn't fake that kind of soul. You either had it or you didn't. Inside, Ethan crossed the room, picking up Ellie's file. He flipped it open, scanned the page, and paused. "Cassandra Reed," he said, looking up sharply. "That was your character in Legacy." Ellie nodded once. "No wonder," Ethan murmured almost to himself. He remembered that performance now. The searing villainy, the devastating sorrow hidden beneath a regal mask. He hadn't connected the scrappy girl before him to the screen goddess who had haunted his mind for weeks after the private screening. He closed the file with a snap, his decision made. "You're our ambassador," he said simply, no more auditions needed. Ellie blinked, but otherwise didn't react. She accepted the victory as she had accepted the mockery with quiet, unshakable grace. Ethan turned to his assistant. "Tell the others to go home. The search is over." Outside, the door swung open again. The assistant stepped out, clearing his throat. "Ladies, thank you for your time. The casting has concluded. Noble's new ambassador has been selected." A stunned silence rippled through the room. Dozens of heads snapped toward Brooke, smiles already forming, congratulations ready to be launched. But then the assistant spoke again, each word a hammer blow. "The role has been awarded to Ms. Ellie Harper." For a long heartbeat, no one moved. The world simply stopped. Brooke's glass slipped from her hand, smashing into glittering shards on the marble floor. For a moment, no one breathed. The assistant's words hung in the pristine air, like gunpowder after a spark. Ellie Harper. The girl in the crumpled dress. The one they had laughed at, dismissed, pitied. Brooke's face drained of color. She opened her mouth once, then again, but no words came out. The glass at her feet continued to glitter, like tiny shards of a crown shattered beyond repair. "No," Brooke said, finally. voice cracking with the effort to remain composed. "There's been a mistake. You meant me." She stood trying to gather the shreds of dignity still clinging to her. Every eye was on her now, not with admiration, but with something colder. Sharper, pity, schadenfreude, relief that, for once the mighty had fallen, and it wasn't them. The assistant shook his head politely but firmly. "No mistake, Ms. Kendall. Ethan Cole personally selected Ms. Harper. Thank you for coming." Brooke's hands curled into fists at her sides. She wasn't just angry, she was humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. In front of the producers, she needed to impress the directors who held futures in their palms. This wasn't just a lost campaign, it was a crack in her invincibility, and cracks had a way of spreading. "I want to speak to Ethan," she demanded, her voice rising. "This isn't over." The assistant, clearly used to handling tantrums, gave a small bow. "I'll relay your request," he said smoothly. He disappeared inside the casting room, leaving Brooke standing exposed, trembling with fury. Whispers ignited around the room like dry grass catching fire. No one dared to laugh openly yet, but the glee was palpable. A few of Brooke's former courtiers edged away as if afraid her downfall might be contagious. Allies evaporated when crowns fell. It had always been that way. The assistant returned a minute later, his face unreadable. "Mr. Cole said—" He hesitated, then delivered the death blow. "When she sees the final ad, she'll understand why we chose Ellie." Brooke swayed slightly as if struck. A beat of silence, heavy and damning. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and walked out head high, but the tremble in her shoulders betraying her. The door closed behind her with a hollow thud. In the lounge, the remaining actresses shifted, some exchanging glances, others quickly gathering their things. The war was over. There was no point lingering on a battlefield littered with broken dreams. Claire Dawson stood by the far wall, her arms crossed, a small private smile curving her lips. Ellie had done it. Against every prediction, every mockery, every stacked deck, she had done it. The assistant approached Claire, offering a respectful nod. "Mr. Cole would like to see you and Ms. Harper to finalize the contract." Claire inclined her head. Of course. Inside the casting room, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Gone was the scowl, the razor-edged disdain. Ethan Cole stood by a display of Noble's heritage fragrances, a rare, genuine excitement in his eyes. He shook Claire's hand briskly, then turned to Ellie. "Ms. Harper," he said, voice softer, reverent, even, "welcome to Noble." Ellie gave a small nod, her expression calm. She didn't beam, didn't preen, didn't gloat. She accepted the victory the same way she had accepted the scorn, gracefully, quietly unshakable. Papers were signed. A future rewritten. As they exited the tower. Later, Claire threw a sidelong glance at her client, who was busy unwrapping a hot dog from a foil wrapper bought off a street vendor. "You know," Claire said dryly, "most people celebrate winning a global campaign with champagne, not mystery meat." Ellie shrugged, taking a defiant bite. "I like hot dogs." Claire laughed, the tension finally breaking. "You," she said, shaking her head, "are a walking paradox." Ellie grinned juice from the hot dog glistening on her fingers. "Just smart enough to survive," she said, "just dumb enough to enjoy it." The city rushed by around them, glittering and chaotic, and for once it felt like they were moving faster than it. Behind them, high in the glass tower of Noble Corporation, the old order cracked and crumbled. Ahead of them, something new was being built, something rougher, wilder, but real. Ellie Harper hadn't changed for them. She hadn't begged for their approval, hadn't cloaked herself in borrowed glitter. She had shown up exactly as she was. And somehow, miraculously, that had been enough. Maybe Claire thought, watching the girl beside her grin and demolish a second hot dog, maybe the world was finally ready for something real. Or maybe Ellie was just too stubborn to care either way. Either way, the world would know her name sooner than they ever expected. She hadn't needed diamonds, she hadn't needed fame or a gown stitched from silk spun by forgotten kings. All she had needed was herself. Bare, unadorned, real. In a room full of stars wrapped in borrowed light, she had been the only one burning her own fire. Quietly, fiercely, unapologetically. Ellie. Harper didn't win because she fit their mold. She won because she shattered it without ever raising her voice or changing her skin. And somewhere between the falling of a queen and the rise of an unlikely heir, the world remembered, true nobility isn't worn, it's lived. It's the grace you carry through humiliation, the strength you wield in silence, the truth you hold when the whole world demands you lie. Ellie didn't just walk into history that day. She rewrote it with nothing but an old dress, a battered pair of shoes, and a soul no throne could ever outshine.